Remember, there has to be a certain amount of erupted material in order for it to qualify as create a caldera or, like a depression. Because of the implosion of the magma and then the outburst. So really how we base it is the volume, even volume of pyroclastic flow.
Tonight, Marie D. Jones, the best-selling author, Marie D. Jones, who has more than 20 books to her credit. Yes, that Marie D. Jones, and the same Marie D. Jones you have seen on the History Channel's Ancient Aliens and Nostradamus Effect series, and she has also served as a special UFO abduction consultant for the 2009 Universal Pictures science fiction movie, The Fourth Kind. It's Marie D. Jones night, and she's coming up right after this on My Alien Life. My Alien Life is recorded live from atop the Northern Rocky Mountains and is available on Spotify, Stitcher, iTunes, and everywhere fine podcasts are found. My website is at www.myalienlifepodcast.com. There you will find my email address, all previously recorded shows, and more. I am Cameron Brower. This is My Alien Life, and the podcast starts right now.
My Alien Life Podcast.
Three, two, one, zero, and liftoff.
Marie D. Jones is a best-selling author of nonfiction and fiction and a screenwriter producer with her own company, Where's Lucy Productions. She has appeared on television and on radio all over the world, and she has hundreds of credits writing for magazines, guest blogs, reviews, short stories, online articles, and one more credit tonight being on this show. Marie D. Jones, thank you very, very much for joining me.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's an awesome day. I mean, we've been trying to get together now for, I'm not exaggerating anything. It's been like 2.5 months, and you were sick for a while.
Yeah, I had no voice for at least 2 months, and it's just now kind of coming back. So
what did they find with that? What was going on there? I mean, that's unusual.
It's a problem I've had since childhood. If I get a respiratory or a cold, it goes right to my throat.
Lucky
and
you.
If I lose my voice, which happens occasionally, it can last up to 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 days. I just don't know. The problem then was that I had to do a lot of talking, and I kept pushing it. And then it was like the next day I wouldn't be able to talk at all. And, kind of like, well, I have a life. I have to talk.
Well, I was literally like 3.5 hours ago getting ready to go home, and I was going to write up some really amazing questions that would have just blown your mind. And I had a fire in my office, and I don't even know if I want to call it a fire. There was smoke, and fire department was there for 2.5 hours. The electrician was there for probably an hour and a half, and they found nothing, and it's the craziest thing in the world. So I was like, what is wrong with this day? And I thought, Marie D. Jones.
Yep.
Does bad luck follow you? I don't think so, but I'm lucky to have you. That's for sure, and I'm looking at it that way.
Call it chaos, not necessarily. Well, I mean, I hope in the case of your office, it's not bad luck, but
Yeah.
yeah,
It's fully insured, and I could use some new furniture anyway. But we'll see. We'll see. Yeah, we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, really.
So
crazy,
you know, I've been following you for a while, and what originally drew me to you was the book Supervolcano. I have this idea in my head that I should be prepping, and I always tell people that you know, plan for the worst and hope for the best. But you know, this is one of these things. I live right north of the Yellowstone Supervolcano.
Yeah.
So is that something that isn't going away, right? I mean, we still need to worry about that, even though we're not hearing as much about the Yellowstone Supervolcano.
Excuse me. So here's the problem. The last known supervolcanic eruption was Lake Taupo, New Zealand, about 28,000 years ago, I believe. And because of that, we don't have a real record of all of the things that lead up to a super eruption. We have good guesses. We have some ideas of things that we've seen. But nobody knows for sure what the exact scenario would be, like A and then B happens and then C happens. And we do know that there are some things like microquake bursts, larger earthquakes, quake swarms, carbon dioxide release, tree kill. There's certain things that we do know kind of might hint that something's happening. Movement of magma under the ground, but, you know, is it going to be, it's like, I live in Southern California. We're always waiting for the big one on the San Andreas Fault. So a lot of things will happen. We'll have earthquakes on that fault, little swarms and this and that, but it doesn't quite go through, doesn't quite break big. So with Yellowstone, it could happen any day. It could happen a million years from now. Nobody knows. The only good thing that my dad taught me, I wrote the book with my father. He passed away a few years ago, sadly, but there's a 24/7 monitoring service, not just of Yellowstone, but also of the Long Valley caldera nearer to where I live in Southern California, and other, you know, potential supervolcano calderas, and they're always being monitored. If something is going to happen, probably we'll get plenty of warning, but most people aren't prepared for the disasters that they face on a yearly level. I honestly don't know of a lot of people that are prepared for that catastrophic an event. Nobody wants to think about it.
I don't want to think about it.
I know.
So what is considered?
You know, you're too busy thinking about, you know, hurricanes that happen every year, tornadoes, earthquakes, blizzards, floods. Those things happen all the time, and you see how unprepared people are for those.
Yeah, so that's a rough one. And you know, a supervolcano. I mean, be prepared to be everything gone for a while, for a long time, probably.
Yeah, I mean it's survivable if you're in the right, you know, if you're not in the 500-mile radius, if you're not where the, you know, the wind is going to blow the ash. I mean, it's survivable for a lot of people, but it's certainly not going to be life as you know it, because after a supervolcanic eruption, there's like a 6-year nuclear winter. And that's probably where most people will die. You know, lack of food and no fresh water, no drinkable water, people killing each other, and the air quality. So, yeah, it's not something that we want to think about because we turn on the news and there's so much going on. But I think in the back of people's minds, they need to just be aware that it's there.
What's considered a supervolcano? I mean, how big does it have to be before it's a supervolcano?
Let me see if I can find the exact number. There has to be a certain amount of erupted material in order for it to qualify, and it is also not, it can start out as a conical, but it will create a caldera or, you know, like a depression. because of the implosion of the magma and then the outburst. So really how they base it is the volume, the cubic volume of pyroclastic flow and ash and rock and gases that are released into the air. And just to kind of give you a general idea, it would be on the scale of, 30 times Mount St. Helens. Let's see, one supervolcanic eruption, 240 cubic miles of magma erupted. Now that's a lot. So when we're thinking about something like Mount Pinatubo or Krakatoa or Mount St. Helens, the ones that we're used to, it's nothing in comparison. It's like comparing a 2.0 earthquake with an 8.0
Right.
on the Richter scale. It's just almost unimaginable.
It's exponential and it's catastrophic and something that we could never imagine. Explain to me, if you can, what the mechanism, we see, let's just take a smaller scale, but Mount St. Helens, they had the pyroclastic flow and then they had the ash. Now the ash came spewing out of this, broken cone for, quite a long time. And how does that work? Where does that ash come from? How does that ash, it's created? I mean, basically, how is that created?
There's an awful lot of magma down below, and once it hits air, it's oxygen, it becomes lava, but there's also, because of the force of what's going on, the sort of outburst, you've got, heated rock, and it's turned to glass in some cases. You've got ash, you've got all kinds of debris that are shooting out of there. And it's just ongoing until the magma that's beneath that volcano is either tapped out or calms down.
Right.
It just doesn't have as much power to explode outward. And, some of these guys, some of these volcanoes, I always think of them as male, they go on for, in Hawaii, you'll hear that they are spewing, lava for months. It's almost like it's part of the scenery, it becomes part of the environment. So it's really just all about what's going on below and how much movement there is and where the cutoff is.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. And I was around during Mount St. Helens, and the actual wall, in Montana, the wall of ash that we could see for miles and miles away was incredible.
Oh my God.
And once it got over us and we were in it, it wasn't that bad, but that initial wall, I mean, it was scary because you didn't know what to expect and it wasn't that thick. But when you look at a supervolcano, you're talking about something so much more dense and so much more ash that is going to fall in such a wide area, correct?
Yeah, I mean, it would literally blacken the skies, block out the sun. Excuse me. And then depending on what hemisphere it's in, if it's in the northern hemisphere, it'll stay in the northern hemisphere, but it will at some point reach the southern. And so that means just catastrophic damage to crops and agricultural belts, water that's ruined from the ash, and people with asthma and respiratory issues. And ash can easily blind you. You can choke on just such a little teeny tiny amount of ash because you breathe it in, it goes into your lungs and it mixes with moisture in your lungs. It's like cement. So there's all that sort of aftermath, the after effects. The initial shock, the initial eruption, if you're lucky enough to not live, downwind or within, like I said, it's about a 500-mile radius, you might have time to drive down, cross the border, and just get as far away as you can. But eventually it's going to catch up to you no matter where you are. And the thing is that we don't think about things like our agriculture and the water and food, the production and the distribution of food through, cargo ships into our ports. All of that would stop.
Absolutely.
The roads would be a mess across the country. Where do you get trucks to deliver goods? all of that stuff would stop. You'd have to be self-sustainable as much as you could.
And it would be tough to do. I mean, for a catastrophe like that, you would have to be prepared a lot differently in rather than if, of course, nuclear war. Now that's one of the things that people think of a lot, but
I think that too, actually, you could prepare probably in the same way.
Sure.
By having, an underground bunker, people used to laugh. Now people are like, oh, can you get them on Amazon? Do they deliver them?
Oh, I guarantee you better be able to get it on Amazon because,
I'm sure you could, right?
that's another disaster waiting to happen because soon they will have to get everything from Amazon, but
that's actually kind of leads into the whole idea that if our electronic grid, if there's cyber terrorism, that's a whole other catastrophe that people, I think, are so unprepared for.
Right.
It's like, well, it wouldn't really affect me because, I just won't be able to get online. It's like, no, you don't understand. So there's a lot of stuff that I wrote a disaster preparedness manual because I'm actually trained in everything I'm trained through FEMA and the fire department here in San Diego. I've had a lot of training for the last 20 years, Red Cross, you name it. And it's just really amazing how even with my training, I will panic when something happens or I'll forget what to do. And then I see people that are absolutely clueless that are doing things that could actually end up hurting their chances of survival. So I think it's really important that people think about and actually get off their butts and do something, but you can't force people to, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink.
And you wrote a book, The Disaster Survival Guide. So why did you write that book? Was it because of your study of supervolcanoes, or was this something unrelated?
No, I wrote it recently, but it had been something I wanted to do. I lived in Los Angeles for over 15 years, and I lived there during some of the biggest earthquakes that they've ever had, including the Northridge earthquake, during which, at 4 o'clock in the morning, I honestly thought I was going to die. That's how bad it was. And that was so traumatic to not just me, but everybody, people were suffering with PTSD and hypervigilance for years, not months, years. So I lived through a lot of that. I lived through several large fires where I had to be evacuated from Malibu, from Calabasas. Then I came to San Diego, had to be evacuated several times here from massive wildfires. And it just was like, holy crap. I hope I can say that. And people are clueless, and they're blocking evacuation routes, and they're panicking and doing this, doing that. And I had already had some training when I lived in Burbank for Burbank Police and Fire. So I already knew a lot of this stuff. And I found out there was this program called CERT, Community Emergency Response Team. And it's all across the United States through your local fire department. Anybody can join. Free training, intensive training. It goes from 8 to 12 weeks. You get all kinds of gear and equipment. And then you have ongoing training in just about everything you can think of, from active shooter drills to surviving a pandemic or a tsunami. And of course, here in Southern California, fires and earthquakes. So then I thought, a book would be, there's a million books out there, but I really wanted to do one myself that pretty much listed every possible thing you could encounter and what you do before, what you do during, and what you do after. So it's like a field guide that you can look up real quick. Because, like I said, I have years and years of training, and I still forget, or I get scared, or I panic. I worry about, where's my kid, So to have something where you can just kind of look it up really quickly. Oh, yeah. Okay, that's what you do.
And I think most people don't even have a plan, as a family, where to meet. Because you brought up family, and that's one of the first things you think about. That's probably one of the most important things. If there's ever a disaster, what are you going to do? Well, nobody has that plan.
Yeah.
We're going to meet at this house or this place. Nobody does that. I mean, nobody wants to talk about it.
Yeah.
I don't want to talk about it.
I know, but it's so essential. I mean, it starts from even the small things too, like a house fire. Does everybody know how to get out of every window? And, does everybody know how to call 911? If you have little kids, have they been taught? Where are the fire extinguishers? Blah, blah, blah. But in the bigger situation, we have cell phones, which makes a lot of things a lot easier. But in a major disaster, as I've learned several times here in San Diego, the cell phones go out and you've got nothing. And I also happen to be a ham radio operator because our fire department really kind of promotes that because it is the ultimate final form of communication in a major disaster. It's the only thing that's still up and running. And I was actually able to prove that. We had some, major disasters here where the information I was getting on my ham radio was I was able to then tell my neighbors and other people, here's what's going on, and it's not terrorism, it's this. So, there's just, I think when you live through major disasters, you are more prone to want to learn. The sad thing is, if you don't do it right away, I think we go back to our default setting of, fine, it's, it's not going to happen again. I'll be fine. And then it happens again.
One of the ironic things that happened to me that made me think about it a little bit, and it was totally unrelated, but watching a new business sprout up in my town, it was a high-end shop that sold watches, very expensive watches. And I was thinking, it's like, nobody's going to buy these watches, especially here because we have cell phones, and I'm not going to wear another watch probably for the rest of my life because I have a cell phone. So it made me think about, my cell phone has a compass. It has an amazing flashlight. However, like you said, it's going to have limited use, especially if you can't communicate with each other. A flashlight for the next 24 hours isn't going to be that great, but
and the thing is,
do I have a flashlight in the house? I don't know.
Exactly, or candles. I mean, if your power goes out for long enough, your phone's going to lose its charge.
Right.
So do you have a solar, backup or battery backup charger kit that you can use? Otherwise, there goes your phone. And people forget, my battery. I charge my battery the minute it gets to 50%. And I put gas in my tank the minute I get to half a tank of gas. I'm just kind of trained to do that. I panic when my phone has been down to like a 20% charge because I feel like, oh my God, if something happens.
Well, I do that for sure. Yeah.
On the freeway.
Down to the 20%. That's the only time I panic.
Really? Yeah. Not at 30. It's about 20. And same thing with your tank of gas. It's, keep it as full as you can because,
right.
That's, another thing. Too.
I spend a lot of time telling my kids it's just as easy to keep the top half full, but I don't live by that. So, I'm a disaster waiting to happen.
But, it's even like I told my son, every time you go to the grocery store, you pick up a gallon of water. Before you know it, you got a bunch of water that you can stock in the garage and get some power bars and, just things that you don't think about, dog food or cat food if you have pets.
And I think water is one of those things that people really overlook. I mean, everybody has a bottle or two in their car or whatever, but you need a lot of water. To be without water, you're going to know in a day or two exactly how much water you need. You need a bunch.
Right. I think that it's called the rule of 3. So you can survive without air for 3 minutes. You can survive without water for 3 days. You can survive without food for 3 weeks in general.
Right.
And chances are you're going to be breathing. So if you don't have water, you're in big trouble.
And that 3 days, even 2 days without water is going to be a bad 2 days.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I think that's the most important thing.
So what about these companies that sell survival kits and things like that? Can we do better on our own? Putting together our own kit?
Not necessarily. You know what? If you're busy or you're lazy,
Yeah, busy or
or
lazy.
you're uncertain,
Both.
I have both. I have gigantic bug out bag that I got from the training. I have a giant bucket filled with food and water and medical stuff that I bought offline. I didn't get it at Amazon. I got it at a survival store online for $99. And it's like 2 weeks worth of food and water for 2 people. So I'm going to buy a couple more. You know what? You could, if you have kids and they're young, you can make kind of a fun day of it where we're going to go to Home Depot or Lowe's or whatever. We're going to get a couple of big buckets because you will need a bucket for bathroom duties. People don't think of that. It's like just fill them. We're going to go get water. We'll fill them with tools, rope, wrench, all kinds of 4-in-1 tools, fire extinguisher, stuff like that. Then head over and get some non-perishable food and water and make it like a big thing for the kids to get involved in. Other people will do a little bit at a time, and they're building up a pantry. So if you don't have a lot of time and you're really worried about waiting too long, absolutely buy them online. They have some phenomenal deals, and they have, if you live alone, they have, kits for one person. They have family size. It's definitely worth the investment.
Yeah, the buckets are a big deal because, again, they can be used for 1,006 different things, and especially for the water source and just being able to the storage part of it. And there's so many things out there too that there's a lot of expensive survival gear, survival food, but
there is.
So where do you think is the best deal? I mean, Amazon's a great deal on just about anything now, but
you can. Yeah, I'm not sure if their selection. I'm sure they have a lot of stuff. I actually am trying to not shop on Amazon as much. Just, I think that they're monopolizing the world.
I feel like I'm giving in if I do.
I know.
I mean, I really do.
Yeah, but we want to save money too because we work hard for our money. So there's, you could actually search for emergency kits, survival kits, medical first aid kits. And there might be Walmart, Target. Everybody has them. I found that survival outlets are the most knowledgeable. And sometimes they include things that you just, like you smack your head and go, oh my God, I never thought of that. Yeah, like a crowbar, because if you're stuck in a room and there's like an earthquake and the building has shifted, now we have a crowbar. So that wherever you get it, I just think it's important people get something.
A couple of years ago, I was in bed and it was like 11:30 at night, and this is in the middle of Montana. It's super dark. There's no street lights, and it's as black as it could possibly be. Well, we had a 4.3 earthquake, and it lasted about 20. I know, but it lasted about 20 seconds, and it made me think, oh my God, I can't even imagine what a 7 would be like. I mean, this is. It didn't break anything and everything was fine, but that 7 has just got to be terror for minutes, and then the aftershocks that follow. And what ends up ultimately happening is people panic and they're, running out of their houses and grabbing up anything that is edible for sale and all the gasoline. And then,
oh my gosh, the price gouging. Absolutely. Yeah. Because after the Northridge earthquake, my husband at the time, we went up to, it wasn't a 7-Eleven, but it was like a little mini market in Burbank, in California, to get extra water. So here we are, because we refused to go back up in our condo. It was trashed, and we were terrified. $20 for a gallon of water.
Wow.
Yeah.
I saw that
owner.
I saw that after 9/11 too. Oh yeah, and it's good if they go after the price gougers. But I only had, fortunately had seen that one time in my life, and that was after 9/11, and I was on vacation, and we're like, well, let's go home. Things aren't the same anymore, and we really didn't have any desire to be out camping anymore, and gas was like 8 something a gallon, and we'll wait. So we spent one more night, and the next day was fine because the state of Oklahoma came
The
out and
initial
said,
panic.
"Hey, you guys aren't going to do, you're not going to gouge gasoline prices," and so luckily that happened for us, but it made it home.
It does. It happens, and some people are honest and don't do it, and others just want to take advantage of the opportunity. But another thing that we found out too was, having $100 cash on you at all times, but not 20s.
Why is that?
Ones.
Really? Yeah. There you go.
Preferably ones, the smaller bills, because if somebody has something that you want to barter, and all you have are 20s, and they're asking $6, you're going to be SOL.
Right.
So have the smaller bills, and keep it at home in a safe or a little, lockbox or something, and it's there, however much you can put in. And that's what, you'll hear people say, well, I can't afford it. It's like, you know what? If something happens, you're going to be kicking yourself that you didn't just bite the bullet and stock it away.
That's an amazing point. You probably just literally saved somebody. One thing I wanted to ask you about is, I know that you've authored over 15 books, probably even more by now, but there's such a huge variety of things that you write about. It's amazing. I'm looking right now at Amazon.com and I'm looking at all these books, and every one of them is different. I mean, so different from each other. How do you do that? I mean, how do you find that focus to write about so many different things?
It started out because I'm actually on my 23rd book, and I have three more that I'm under contract for. Yeah, they just keep popping out.
Yeah.
So it started, I never wanted to write nonfiction. When I was young, I wanted to write novels, I wrote short stories, I wanted to write screenplays. I loved fiction and storytelling. And one year I just got sort of a bug in my you-know-what to write a nonfiction book. And I wrote just this kind of silly, fun book called Looking for God in All the Wrong Places. Just social commentary about, materialism and spirituality and all that stuff. And I think it sold 3 copies. But it was good enough that it got me an agent, Lisa Hagen, who is still my book agent. And this was eons ago, years and years ago. And so from there, she said, let's get you some books out. And I really wanted to write about the paranormal and science. And the very first book that I said I wanted to write was a book called Science, PSIence,
mm-hmm.
where I wanted to compare quantum physics and the science of consciousness and all this stuff to the paranormal. And she said, well, you don't have enough of a platform. Nobody knows who you are. You're not a scientist. And I said, well, my father's a physicist, so he can vet my book. And I just wanted it so bad that we went to New Page Books, and they gave me the deal. And from there, I wrote, a few more books on my own. Then I teamed up with another writer named Larry Flaxman. We wrote a bunch of books together. I wrote Supervolcano with my dad. I'm now doing, most of my books are for Visible Ink Press. So I kind of went from wanting to just writing about the paranormal to expanding into unknown anomalies, human consciousness, cutting edge science. And then it got to the point where it's like, you know what? I'm just going to write about the stuff I want to write about. What gets me excited? And it was hard because a lot of my writer colleagues were niche writers. They just focused on either UFOs, ghosts, cryptids, spirituality, whatever. They had their own niche and they stuck to it. And I didn't want to do that. And I thought, this isn't going to work. But it did. I really have great publishers, have a great agent, and the people that read my books and sort of, I hate to say follow me, it's not like a cult, but they're very open to, whatever I write about. It's like, oh, I wrote about ghosts for 10 years. Now I'm writing about supervolcanoes. Oh, that's great. Awesome. Yeah, I'm going to read it. So I've been really, 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 really lucky.
So do you feel you're writing about stuff that you want to write about?
I am. But here's the problem. So like I told you, I'm getting up there with the number of books that I've done. And I'm really running out of, especially with the paranormal and UFOs. UFOs are my first love since I was like 3 years old, my obsession. But what I realized, there's a lot of people out there writing great books. And, I'm not going to try to compete with them by writing the same stuff over and over again. They're doing great. Nick Redfern is, one of my, I just look up to him so much. He's writing all kinds of great UFO books. And, same thing with cryptids. Same thing with ghosts. So it's gotten to the point where, I've almost exhausted what I think I can write about in paranormal until something new and unusual happens. And so I did. I wanted to branch out. I didn't want to stop writing nonfiction. And so I was really, really pleased when New Page allowed me to write the book Mind Wars, which is about mind control, domestic surveillance, spying. I love that stuff. And then they let me write The Power of Archetypes, a whole other different direction. That was a more self-help type of book. So I guess you could say, like, after I proved what I could do with my niche, I got to go outside the box.
So was there any of those you wrote a bunch, any of those that you felt that you absolutely had to write, or were they all part of this good part?
Oh, that's a good question.
Well,
yeah, that's actually a good question.
Sometimes you got to write.
Well,
especially if you read a lot.
It's been a complete cross between books that I said, could I write this? Is this okay? And books that my publisher said, hey, would you be interested in writing a book on this topic? One of my most successful books is 1111, The Time Bomb Phenomenon. And I wrote it with Larry Flaxman, and we were approached by New Page Books. Could you write a book about this 1111 stuff? And we were both like, what 1111 stuff? I had never even heard,
Right.
So we looked into it, and it was like, holy moly, there's this huge phenomenon going on here. That book is so popular. It was written years ago, and we just got the chance to revise and update it. It'll be out in November. I think my favorite book, the most fun, was Science, the first one. It just, everything about that book fell into place. From what I understand, was one of the biggest shows that was ever on Coast to Coast radio. And it just, everybody who reads it loves it. And that was just such like a labor of love for me. I'm trying to think of books since then. I love them all. I think probably the most underrated book that I absolutely loved was Viral Mythology. And we didn't sell a lot of copies because it's kind of hard to describe that book. It's about how information spread in ancient times and how it came to us in modern day through art, architecture, writing, music, song, whatever. Just how the flow of information from history to today. I always loved that book. So I definitely don't think there are any books that I hated writing. The only book that gave me some pause is The Demons, the Devil, and Fallen Angels, because a number of people warned me, you're going to probably be experiencing some unusual things, and scared the what out of me, but nothing ever happened. So that was a creepy book to write.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I've been told too. And you look into that and you actually become part of it, or can become part of it. It doesn't always happen,
Yeah.
but that's a little scary to me.
It is. And I got nervous, but I think I'm been at this enough that if anything was going to mess with me, it would have done so, a long time ago. I've experienced a lot of technical issues writing that book and writing Mind Wars, definitely, but nothing too terrifying. So yeah, that's just how it happened. I started out doing really just wanting to focus on the paranormal, and then feeling like, well, what's there to write about that hasn't already been written about?
What about things? What about things you didn't finish? For example, I'm going to go further into this a little bit, but what I want to ask you is, you're at that point where, it's just not working. You're writing and you're feeling like you have to make it happen every day. Have you ever had those experiences where you just had to quit, and give it up?
Oh God. Yeah. Last week I told my agent that I was quitting. And of course she said, yeah, sure you are. She goes, what else are you going to do? You don't know how to do anything else.
But you have a lot of unfinished works out there, right?
In fiction, and that's what really bugs me. So I had kind of made the decision very recently to tone down to, the nonfiction. I was doing like 2 books a year, and so I'm going to do, 2 books at a time, like 3 books, 4 books a year. Now I have 1 book that I'm finishing up this year by November. I have 2 books for next year, 1 for the first 6 months I'll be writing, and 1 for the last 6 months. And that's it, because I really have felt the pull to return back and get all my unfinished novels. I've got a bunch of screenplays that I've written, but that's a whole different thing. And now I'm making independent films. But the novels, they eat away at me every day. They just haunt me. And I haven't been able until this point to justify, moving from nonfiction, because that's my living. I write full time. That's how I make my living. And it's going to take a leap of faith, but I think that I'm at the point where, if I don't do it now, I'm never going to do it.
I think writing's probably one of the most amazing art forms there is, and I love it. And I love music, so I love making music, but I love the idea of writing a book, and I've never ever finished that. But one of the things that I've seen and people that I've met, and I've known you've seen this, there's not a lot of bookstores anymore. So
I know.
So that's not a good thing. And that's always one thing that's really disappointed me is the lack of bookstores, and you go to like Portland or Seattle and they have these great big bookstores, and you can't find them, anywhere else other than these towns that are big cities that are really into reading. But, you can still walk into the bookstore and you can see the guy who poured his soul out and heart out into some book. And it's probably not that great, but he's sitting in front of the bookstore and he's got a pile of books there and everybody walks by him and they don't make eye contact. So what's that mean to you? How does that make you feel when you see that?
You know what? I buy the book. I don't care what it is. I will stop and buy a book because I know how that feels. I haven't done a lot of book signings. My book, it's weird. I've not been asked to speak a lot or do a lot of book signings, but I do a lot of radio. And I also have a pretty big social network following that, I can use to promote. But I know how that feels. I know how it feels because I've been at conferences, where I spoke and I had a table and watch people look at your books and go, oh, that looks really great. And then they walk by. It's like, come on. So I always buy one and I chit chat and I get them to sign it. And they are so grateful. And what I've noticed is that if I do that, sometimes other people will come up and start talking to the person. So, yeah, but I have to tell you, because of the loss of bookstores and because of the rise of Amazon, writers are not making anywhere near the money that they used to. I have a lot of friends that write novels and were self-publishing. They were selling millions of copies that are now, willing to get full-time jobs. And writers like me, that's the reason why we write so many books, is because we have to keep that flow up, the flow of advances, the flow of royalties. And usually with a new book, it gets people curious to go look at some of your older stuff. And if you don't do that, you're dead in the water. I don't know how these people who write one or two books, it's got to be a hobby, and they probably have a full-time job. But when you're trying to make a living at it, it has drastically changed. So now everybody's got to pump out content and keep it going.
And I do love the person who writes the book that's basically all in. I mean, I hate to see it, but somebody who's spent everything and they have a theory that nobody else has, and they're willing to stick their neck out every day, and you see it all over Facebook. And it's one of those things. So what's different now than 10 years ago? How do you sell your brand different now than you would have 10 years ago? Because things have changed in the way people read.
Well, yeah, I mean, not just the way people read and how they buy things to read, but when I started out, it was at the height of the popularity of the paranormal. All the TV shows were just coming out. So everybody wanted paranormal books, and they would pay for a book. Now we're kind of at the stage where it's just so overloaded, and people feel like, well, I don't need to buy your book because there's free articles and stuff I can read on the internet, or I could turn on TV and see a million different ghost hunting shows or what have you, or UFO or cryptid shows. There's a bunch of them. So for writers, it's become way more difficult to try to get people to buy our books, even though they're cheaper than ever. And now you can buy them on Kindle for like 99 cents. So I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of writers I know are diversifying. Like I know a lot of screenwriters who are now adapting their own scripts into novellas and selling them. So, you just have to be resourceful. And I've always wanted to try to write about stuff that was unique, but it gets difficult. I have a book coming out in September. It's called Celebrity Ghosts and Notorious Hauntings. I think it's going to be huge just because it's so much fun. The stuff in it is just so fun. But it's not new. It's not unique. I, happen to put a unique spin on it because I think I probably packed more into this book than anybody else out there. But, when that idea was presented to me, for a minute I thought, well, how is that going to sell? There's a million books out there like that. So you just have to do what you can. And I think developing your own style, doing a lot of radio and interviews and stuff. And some people put their own money into, they do book tours, but they pay for everything. That's crazy. So yeah, it's different.
It's interesting though. I love seeing it. And like you said, you'll buy the book from somebody who's basically has nothing left and nobody's really reading the book. And I think that's good. But, I think somebody like that, it's really hard to pick them up, once they go through that experience and gets the wind kicked out of them a little bit. It's hard for them to recover. And I'm thinking of a couple of specific examples that I won't mention, but I've actually seen, I've seen people, and I've had them on my show that literally after they were on my show, I never saw them anywhere, not even on Facebook, and they just kind of disappear. So, I mean, there's some research there, and there's a value to that book still.
I will tell you what it requires. An incredible. I've been rejected. I started writing when I was a teenager, and I was selling my writing. I have been rejected so many times that it doesn't even bother me anymore. And you have got to have a really thick skin for every yes, you're going to get 1,000 no's. You got to just plod on. And I'm incredibly stubborn. I'm very driven. And if somebody says no to me, then I'll try to find a way to do it myself. And not a lot of people are like that. They'll just get knocked down and they won't ever get back up. I had a writer friend that I haven't spoken to in years who she used to complain. All she ever did, oh, no, I can't sell my books. And I'm thinking, oh, brother, stop complaining and figure out what's not working. And people just don't have a thick enough skin. That has to be the first thing I think that you develop. Get used to being rejected. And don't ever read your reviews. That's another one.
Do you have anything that you've written that you would love to take out full time if you had the time and just do that? Market that one?
Yeah, I have a few novels that I'm trying to get finished up. I have actually one that's going to be coming out through Vesuvian Books. It's a horror novel called 13. So I'm editing that. That'll be out sometime, I think late next year. And my son and I, when my son was really little, he was bullied all the time because he has a disability. And he formed a spy group at his school called EKHO-Evil Kid Hunting Organization. This is a real true story. And the whole point of the group was all the bullied kids got together and they would spy on the bullies so they knew where they were going to be and how they could avoid the bullies. And they had like gadgets and spy gear and their own website and all kinds of coded messages stuff. And I only found out about it from my son's teachers. They said, have you heard about EKHO? I said, what? They said, your son, is the head of this giant group here at school. And it was just a riot. I didn't know my kid was up to that. I was so proud of him. So we wrote a book. We wrote the first and second installment where we took the basic story of what happened with EKHO and we added sort of a science fiction element to it. And we're writing book 3 now. He's actually at college now. So it goes to show you how long that's been around. That I really can't wait to get back to. I just have a lot of novels that I've started or I've taken notes and I set aside, said, okay, someday I'll come back to you. But, I keep getting waylaid by other things.
Talk about Mind Wars, because I haven't read that yet. That's my next book I'm going to read. And it's crazy. I mean, it's just...
That might be a whole separate conversation.
Right, I know.
I loved writing that book, but it also really shocked and scared me in so many ways. Learning about how we are watched and listened to, how we are, the domestic surveillance part of it with Google and Amazon and, Alexa and all this stuff itself was fascinating. And again, I wrote it with Larry Flaxman, who works in cybersecurity and was able to really talk about how pervasive that is. People don't even realize that their cell phones could be off, but you're still being listened to and all this crazy stuff. But it also gets into the history of mind control from, ancient times with rituals and then through MK Ultra and the CIA spy programs. And now today, who knows what they're up to. We have drones, satellites spying on us and trying to affect our behavior. We have media manipulation, which every day I can't watch the news without seeing, once you see it, you can't unsee it. So that book is just so full of the ways that we are being manipulated and controlled. But it's written so that if people become aware of it, then maybe they can do something about it, even minor things.
I have an iPhone, and this is I don't know what this is, but it blows my mind every time it happens. And I'm only talking, maybe it happens 3 or 4 times a year, but I'll have my phone in the room, and as far as I know, it's off or whatever it does when it's not lit up. And Siri just comes to life and will ask like, well, what are you asking? Are you asking, this? And I'm like, why does that happen? Obviously this phone is really listening to what I say. And there's something that I've said that's woken it up, and I want to know what that is, but I have no idea what that is.
It is, our cell phone suppliers, Verizon, AT&T, would have, they'll have deals with the CIA and, the FBI, the NSA, you name it. They actually have deals to be able to monitor the flow of information. Like we always hear, oh, they're doing it for advertising. That's complete BS. That's part of why it's done. Like if you go on Facebook and Yahoo and you see things, ads for something you just talked on the phone about to your brother or something. Yeah, targeted marketing, absolutely, but a lot of it is a little more insidious. And are they looking for words that might lead them to think you're a terrorist or you're going to shoot up a 7-Eleven? Sure, maybe. I think that that's probably part of it. But I also think that there is it's just a more sinister aspect to it. You do not need to be listening to our conversations. You do not need to be amassing the amount of data that they are from normal people that have no, negative stuff in their backgrounds. And what's the purpose,
And I want to know what is the purpose, because who am I? And, I'll make jokes about this and I'll tell people, who will bring this up, the fact that, or their interpretation or what they believe. And they'll tell me that, they are under surveillance, they believe, or, I have a lot of people that email me or message me every day, just like I'm sure you do as well. And I do wonder, who are these people? Like myself, I'm nobody. What sort of valuable information do I have to somebody who's has some sort of surveillance operation going on with Siri and iPhones? But
I don't know.
I ask myself all the time, what is it? And I want to know.
Again, some of it is somebody wants to make money off of you. So if you and I are talking about, oh, I love my Toyota Corolla, we're going to see Toyota Corolla ads come up on our Facebook or Instagram or what have you. But it goes beyond that. I honestly think that they're data mining targeted words and phrases that might lead them to believe that you're either, Antifa or, a right-wing conservative gun person. It's like that you're a Satanist or you're a Democrat or you're a Republican. It's like they're trying to find where the next problems are that they're going to have to control. I have heard people that work in the alternative health field say that they're constantly having their phones monitored, making sure voices and all kinds of clicks and stuff. Who knows? I will tell you that really did increase. Those kinds of things increased when I was writing Mind Wars. One of the things that happened was I had a different computer and my web camera would start taking pictures. And I told my son, and he covered it up for me. So now the desktop computer I have now doesn't have a webcam, doesn't have a camera. But he said, well, that happens on your phone too, because I would hear my phone camera click, click, click. Like, what the heck? And then, 6 months later, there's an article in the news that, they have the technology to take pictures and record your conversation even when your phone is off.
Right.
And those Alexa things, those Echo things, oh no. Those are awful.
And they're listening all the time, because you can
all the time.
You can activate them, and just globally, it's just the weirdest things that happen. I remember a few years ago in the Taliban, they made news because they're driving Toyotas. And, we were looking into why the Taliban had so many Toyotas. And I've never did find out why the Taliban had so many Toyotas. And I still want to know the answer to that. But, my point is that that we get these little bits of information and make us think that there's something going on, but then we get desensitized and we forget. We have short memories. I think that is absolutely true.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like we know all this is happening and we're not protesting and fighting it. People say, "Oh, well, the internet and social networking and my cell phone. I need it." You're absolutely right. It is a way, and maybe that's part of it, that they're trying to test how far they could take things. I don't know. It's like UFO disclosure. Is it happening, that sort of trickle down, get people used to it, numb them to it, so that when it finally happens, they'll be like, yeah, whatever. We already knew. I don't know.
Are you going to feel that way? I'm not going to feel that way. It's going to be a shock to me.
It will. Oh yeah. I will love it. Well, hopefully it'll be a positive thing, but if not, I will be shocked like you, even though I think both of us, there's a part of us that knows it's coming, it knows it's there. But what'll be really scary for me is the human reaction.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm not worried about the alien as much as I'm worried about the way that people turn on each other at the slightest provocation. Can you imagine? Oh my gosh. And I think that might be the biggest reason why the powers that be don't just come out and say it. Because they know that, you win a basketball game, you're out in the street rioting and turning over cars. Well, can you imagine if they come out with this news? First of all, half the people will say they're lying. It's a misinformation. It's disinformation. It's a diversion. It's a distraction. A UFO could land on the White House lawn and half the people in the country would say, it's fake, it's fake. So they would have to deal with that. But also, I think the government, the military, they're aware of the absolute chaos. So if you do it in a softer trickle down, like the frog story, you put a frog in boiling water, it's going to jump out. But if you put it in cool water, you turn the water up slowly, it'll boil to death. I don't know that that's necessarily true. It might still jump out anyway, but it's not going to feel the effects of the water heating up as drastically. And so, yeah, I think we're being desensitized to so many things.
Did you see the movie District 9? It came out in
I love that
2010.
movie. Oh my God, that was like what a sort of a play on apartheid.
I mean, that could be one possible scenario what that would look like. Disclosure. Of course, that really wasn't disclosure. I mean, here this object shows up over Johannesburg, South Africa, and it's enormous. But the how they talk about or show social segregation and xenophobia.
Yeah, and we would do it to aliens too.
Yeah. We just couldn't wait, So, and that happened, and it basically, showed what that result would look like, and I thought that was well played. I was totally surprised. I expected to see some, I expected to see the same alien movie I'd seen, many times before, but. There was some social commentary there, but then again, it made you think that, that could happen. That could be one of the scenarios that happened, or at least part of it.
Realistic. It was gritty and realistic compared to a lot of the stuff that's, that's out there.
That's one of those that I'm going to have to give a watch before the year is over. So what's coming up next for you? What are you writing now again? Tell me about that.
Well, right now I am writing a book. I actually have a book coming out next on Earth magic, and it's all about pagan traditions and natural, witchcraft, Wicca, paganism, the history, herbal medicine, and herbal remedies. And I had so much fun writing that the publisher asked me to do a book on the rise of new witchcraft, which with the feminist movement and, just sort of a turning away from traditional religion, So I'm writing about that. That's a little more of a historical thing. After that, the next book is going to be a tough one. It's called The Toxin Conspiracies, The Systematic Poisoning of Our Air, Water, Soil, Food, and Body. And I will be covering everything from GMOs to 5G to chemtrails to everything you could think of, vaccines, all of the different controversies that are being talked about right now. Now, that's a book that my publisher and I actually did kind of say, should we do this? Because a lot of people that are writing and talking about that stuff are sort of disappearing. So we'll see. And then the one after that is Ancient Technology, Hidden History, and Suppressed Science. That'll be a fun one.
And what's that about? Are you going to tell us?
That's going to be...
You have to wait for that one?
That's going to be way out. I think in 2021 it'll come out. And it's going to be, ancient civilizations and cultures where we've come to learn that they were way more advanced technologically than we thought. Science that has been suppressed over the years, alternative science, things that sort of got knocked out in the reporting of history by the conquerors, hidden history. Did humanity develop in a different way that we were told? And is the earth as old as we were told? Those kinds of things. So it'll be just a lot of alternative ways of looking at technology, science, and history. Ancient alien theory, of course, is going to get in there. Were we given technological leaps and advancements? Did we have a little help from our friends from above? Did we figure it all out on our own? And what evidence is out there that we might have had help? All that kind of stuff.
Very cool. Can't wait. And again, I have a short memory, but I'm also very impatient. So I want to know what's coming up next.
Well, those are on the record book. So if I sign anything else, it's going to be way down the road.
Right.
Yeah.
Marie D. Jones has been my guest, and Marie, I would love to give you tonight's final word, please, if you would.
Well, I guess if people want to get a hold of me, and I try to answer every email, they can contact me via my website, which is mariedjones.com. And I'm also active on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram. Just look for Marie D. Jones. And I, hope everybody will get out there and read some of my books.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to promote the heck out of them for the next.
Thank you so much.
Forever. I mean, basically you're on board now. You're part of the team. So people get to hear about you for a long, long, long time. And I don't plan on going anywhere.
Good.
Marie D. Jones, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure.
My Alien Life Podcast.
You can find my website at www.myalienlifepodcast.com, and please subscribe to my latest downloads at iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, and at podbean.com. And please follow me and like me on Facebook and Twitter. My Alien Life is written and produced for broadcast at Studio 254 in the Northern Rocky Mountains. The music you are hearing is produced and created by Elion. You can find all Elion's work online at Heart Dance Records.